guys, today we are going to review the movie 12 Strong that comes in 2018, and let's do a full movie review, a pure movie review of this movie. So basically 12 Strong is a war film that focuses less on the spectacles and more on resolve, strain and adaptation. Rather than portraying combat as constant chaos, the film presents war as a process of learning, endurance, and uneasy cooperation. Its tone is serious, grounded, and often deliberately quiet, allowing the weight of decision to settle before action unfolds. And if we talk about narrative phrase approach of pacing, the film unlocks it matured, measured pace, emphasizing preparation, uncertainty, and gradual escalation. Early scenes prioritize context and intent rather than adrenaline. This choice grounds the story in realism, showing how unfamiliar terrain, cultural barriers, and incomplete information shape every move. The the pacing reflects the reality that war is often defined by waiting, planning, and doubts rather than non-stop combat. And if we talk about the narrative avoids rushing emotional payoff, progress feels earned because success comes only after repeated setbacks and recalibration. This slow will enhance credibility and tension. And if we talk about portrayal of brotherhood and trust at its core, 12 Strong is about trust under pressure, and the team is not portrayed as instantly unfair cohesion develops through shared risk rather than speeches or declaration. Trust grows quietly through actions, reliability, and survival, making the bond feel organic rather than manufactured. This understand approach strengthens emotional engagement. Brotherhood is shown as a necessity, not a sentiment. Leadership under uncertainty. Leadership in the film is portrayed as a situational and adaptive authority doesn't guarantee confidence. Leaders question themselves, weigh imperfect choices, and accept responsibilities for consequences. This portrayal avoids glorifying commands and instead emphasizes accountability. The film highlights that leadership in war often means choosing between bad options and living with the outcome. And if we talk about combat depicted as controlled chaos, if we talk about action sequences are restrained and purposeful, combat is fast, confusing, and dangerous, but never stylized for spectacles. The film avoids exaggerated heroics, focusing instead on coordination, timing, and vulnerability. Gunfire feels threatening rather than triumphant. This grounded depiction reinforces the sense that survival depends on precision and discipline rather than bravado. And if we talk about environments as an active force, the landscape plays a critical role. Harsher terrain, extreme weather, and isolation are constant pressure. The environment, it not just a backdrop, it shapes tactics, morale, and endurance. Movement is slow, visibility is limited, and every decision carries physical consequences. The film conveys how geography can be as dangerous as any enemy. And if we talk about emotional resistance and release, emotion is present but controlled. The film avoids melodrama, allowing fear, determination, and fatigue to appear subtly. And if we talk about characters, really articulate their emotion instead, they are conveyed through silence, body language, and exertion. This action reinforces authenticity and respect the seriousness of the subject matter. And if we talk about moral complexity without heavy commentary, the film does not heavily moralize. It presents alliances and conflicts as pragmatic rather than idealistic. Cooperation is driven by necessity, not shared ideology. This approach avoids simplistic good versus evil framing and knowledge the ambiguity of wartime decisions. By withholding judgment, the film invites reflection rather than instruction. And if we talk about cinematography and tone, the visual style favors realism over polish. Muted colors, natural lighting, and wide shots emphasize scale and isolation. The camera often lingers on preparation rather than payoff, reinforcing the sense of deception and vulnerability. The tone remains consistently serious, never undercutting tension with humor or excess stylization. The cost of survival victory in 12 strong is not portrayed as celebratory. Survival feels temporary and fragile. Success brings relief, not triumph. The film acknowledges that progress in war often comes at an emotional and psychological cost that lingers beyond the battlefield. The perspective gives the ending a reflective, sovereign quality. If we talk about overall assessment, 12 Strong is a restrained, grounded warfare that values realism, patience, and quiet determination over spectacles. Its strength lies in its refusal to dramatize war as a heroic fantasy. Instead, it presents conflict as a test of adaptability, trust, and endurance. The film's impact comes not from grand movements but from the accumulation of small, difficult choices, making it a serious, respectful portrayal of modern warfare. And if we go for it's more Let's go for its furthermore review, and it's loading, so you have to wait a little. Okay. So if we talk about the weight of inexperience, one of the film's most subtle strengths is its acknowledgement of inexperiences in a new kind of war. The term, the team is highly trained yet placed in an environment where their expertise does not fully apply. This gap between preparation and reality creates a constant undercurrent of vulnerability. The film emphasizes that skill alone is insufficient. Adaptability becomes the true measure of competence. The tension quietly fuels the narrative. And if we talk about adaptation as survival, not strategy, adaptation in 12 Strong is not framed as a clever innovation but a necessity. The team adjusts because failure to do so means that these adjustments are shown incrementally. Small changes in movement, communication, and reliance on allies, and the film treats adaptation as painful process, often driven by mistakes. Survival is earned through correction. And if we talk about more, let's go for a small review. But it's not like that's the problem. I hope I'll fix it soon. Where we were? Mm, yes, adaptation as survival, not a strategy. Adaptation in 12 Strong is not framed as clever innovation but as necessity. The team adjusts because failure to do so means that these adjustments are shown incrementally. Small changes in movement, communication, and reliance on allies. The film treats adaptation as a painful process often driven by mistake. Survival is earned through correction. And if we talk about the psychological pressure of isolation, isolation weighs heavily on the character. Cut off from familiar support system, the team operates in a psychological vacuum. The absence of reinforcement intensifies every decision. The film communicates this pressure through restrained dialogue and prolonged moment of stillness, allowing tension to build eternally rather than through action. Isolation becomes a mental advisory. Trust built through risk, not ideology. Trust forms not through shared beliefs but through shared danger. The film avoids speeches about unity, showing instead how trust is built when lives are placed in such others' hand. The pragmatic foundation makes alliances feel fragile yet authentic. And if we talk about trust, remain conditional, always tested. And now, if we talk about time as an invisible enemy, the film uses time as a source of tension, delay, waiting, and uncertainty, error, confidence, progress feels slow, and momentum is hard to. This treatment of time reinforcing realism, portraying war as a test of endurance rather than speed, and waiting becomes its own burden. And if we talk about communication and misunderstanding, language barriers and cultural differences introduce friction. Communication is imperfect, and misunderstanding carries a real consequence. The film does not resolve these barriers neatly, allowing discomfort and uncertainty to persist. Understanding is always partial, and if we talk about fear without panic, fear is present but controlled. Characters do not collapse under pressure, but their fear manifests in cautions, decisions making, and heightened awareness. This portrayal avoids dramatization while remaining honest. Fear, sharpness, focus, and if we talk about violence and disruption, not release. Yes, violence interrupts rather than resolve combat scene disrupt fragile stability instead of proving catharsis. Each conflict introduces new complications rather than clean victories. Violence complicates survival. Leadership as burden. Leadership is depicted as constant burden that rather than a position of dominance, decisions, isolate leaders emotionally, forcing them to carry responsibility alone. The film emphasizes the loneliness of command authority and comes with distance. And if we talk about emotional economy, and the film practices uh, emotional restraint using minimal dialogue to convey complex states of mind. Silence is frequently more expressive than words. This economy strengthens authenticity, and respect less communicates more. The fragile of progress. The progress in the film reveals reversible gain are temporary, and security is never guaranteed. This fragility maintains tension even during apparent success. Nothing feels permanent. And if we talk about the essence of celebration, movement that could be trivial are muted, relief replaces joy. Survival is knowledge, quickly reinforcing the film's stone. Victory is understated. If we talk about enduring impact, 12 strong, lingering sense of quiet exhaustion. Rather than acceleration, its impact lies in how to present war as a sustained pressure rather than dramatized climax. The film respects the complexity of conflict by refusing to simplify it. And if we talk about the final reflection extended, 12 Storm the 2018 succeeds by staying grounded in human limitation. It portrays courage not as fearlessness but as resistance under uncertainty by focusing on adaptation, trust, and restraint. The film offers a serious and thoughtful portrayal of modern warfare, one that values realism over spectacles and endurance over heroics. And now, if we let's go for its more ultra review. Hmm. If we talk about war as a state of continuous adjustment, the film presents war not as sequence of decisive battles do, but as a continuous state of adjustment. Every plan exists only temporary. Conditions change, intelligence evolves, and assumptions are repeatedly challenged. This constant recalibration creates a sense of instability that never fully resolves. Every moment of success feels provisional, and certainty is never allowed to settle. If we talk about the erosion of individual identity, as the mission progressed, individual personalities begin to blur function roles, and this is not portrayal as loss but as necessity. The film suggests that there is sustained conflict individual retreats in favor of collective survival. Personal identity becomes secondary of responsibility. And if we talk about selfhood yields to function. And if we talk about discipline and emotional contentment, discipline in the film function as a method of emotional contentment. Character rely on routine and procedure to prevent a fear from overwhelming judgment. This reliance is subtle but constant. The absence of overt emotional breakdowns doesn't indicate calm but control. Emotion is managed, not absent, and the burden of incomplete knowledge. Decisions are made with partial information, and the film never pretends otherwise. The uncertainty permeates every action a leader commits without clarity, aware that outcome can't be predicted. The weight of acting without certainty becomes a recurring tension. Action replaces endurance. And if we talk about the quiet normalization of risk, as danger persists, risk becomes normalized. Character adapt to threat levels that would initially seem intolerable. The film captured this shift gradually, showing how sustained exposure alters perception. Danger becomes routine, the cost of strategic success. Strategic while victories are framed as logistical achievement rather than emotional triumphs. Each success demands greater endurance and deeper commitment. Progress increases obligation rather than relief, and success deepens responsibility. Loyalty tested by survival. Loyalty is not portrayed as unconditional, it is tested repeatedly by fear, exertion, and conflicts. Priorities. The film respects this tension, allowing loyalty to feel fragile and earned rather than assumed. And if we talk about commitment, is continuously renegotiated, and if we talk about silence as psychological space, silence occupies significant narrative spaces. These pauses allow the weight of decision to settle and reveal eternal strain without expecting explosion. Silence becomes a mirror for eternal conflict. Quiet holds meaning, and if we talk about the absence of moral evaluation, the film avoids moral closure. Decisions are judged by outcome rather than ethical certainty. This ambiguity reinforces realism, acknowledging that war rarely provides clean moral conclusion and resolution is withheld. The human body has limitation. Physical fatigue is emphasized subtly. Bodies strain under conditions that erode endurance. The film treats physical limitation as a constraint shaping strategy and moral. The body dictates possibility, and if we talk about time comprehension and expansion, time behaves unevenly. Some moments stress under tension, while other pass abruptly. This manipulation mirrors the subjective experience of prolonged states where perception distorts. Time becomes elastic, and if we talk about emotional contentment, breaking at the edge, though control dominates, cracks appear, brief glances, hesitation, and changes in tone suggest accumulating strain. The film trusts the viewer to notice these structures without highlighting them. Strain reveals itself quietly, survival without narrative reward. If we talk about that survival doesn't provide narrative reward, there is no sense of completion, only continuation. The ending reinforces this, leaving the audience with endurance rather than closure. The story paused, not concludes. And if we talk about weekend reflection, 12 Strong 2018 portrays war as an extended condition of uncertainty, restraints, and adaptation. Its refusal to romanticize or simplify conflicts allow tension to emerge originally. The film power lies in its patience, its respect for limitation, and its acknowledgement that survival is rarely glorious. And if we talk about its more review, then we have to just go for it. And let's go for its more review. It will take a little time. Okay, and if we talk about endurance as the film's true protagonist, the film gradually shifts focus away from individual characters toward endurance itself. Endurance becomes the central force driving the narrative. The man persists not because of confidence or belief in victory, but because stopping it or not an option. This persistence is not heroic in presentation, it is mechanical, almost instinctive. Survival becomes momentum, and if we talk about the normalization of fear, fear is never eliminated, it is absorbed. Early tension sharpens awareness, but over time, fear integrates into routine. The film shows how prolonged exposure to danger reshape emotional threshold. What once caused hesitation become expected. And if we talk about fear losses its sharpness but not its presence. And if we talk about decision making under cognitive fatigue, mental exhaustion subtly affect judgment. Decisions becomes similar, moral direct, sometimes harsher. The films avoid dramatizing mistakes, instead showing how fatigue narrows perspective. And if we talk about choices feel increasingly reactive rather than strategic, clarity erodes gradual. And if we talk about the weight of responsibility without recognition, responsibility accumulate without recognition or relief. Leaders carry the knowledge that outcome will affect lives beyond their limitation. Immediate control. The film does not offer acknowledgement or validation for these burdens. Duty remains unseen. And if we talk about the fragility of control, control in the film is always temporary, even well executed plans depend on external factors that can't be mastered. This fragility creates sustained tension without constant action, and order exists on monotype. And if we talk about emotional compressed over time, emotional compressed rather than explored, there are no dramatized breakdown, only a steady internal internalization of stress. The film suggests that prolonged exposure does not produce catharsis but containment, and pressure moves inward. And if we talk about emotional compression by our time, emotions compares rather than explode, and there are no dramatic there are no dramatic breakdown, only a steady internalization of stress. The film suggests that prolonged exposure doesn't produce catharsis, but content pressured moves inward. And if we talk about survival as obligation, not desire, the desire to survive involves into obligation. Continuing is less about hoping, hope, and more about responsibility to the mission, to teammates, to decision already made, and momentum replaces motivation. And if we talk about the loss of temporal anchors, days blur together. The film reduces marks of time, reinforcing restoration without temporal structure, the mission feel endless, time dissolve. The body is quite product physical strain is shown through slowed movement, labored breathing, and brief pauses. The body resists silently, reminding viewers that endurance has limits. Fatigue speaks softly. And if we talk about tactical success versus emotional toll, every tactical success increase emotional depth. Progress demands more containment, hyper-exposure, and greater risk. The film frames success as cumulative pressure. Achievements carries weight, and if we talk about the and the absence of release, the film denies emotional release. There is no moment where tension fully resolved. Even apparent victories feel provisional and incomplete, and relief remain partial. And if we talk about collective identity or individual glory, individual recognition fades entirely. The group operates as a single unit. This collective identity reinforces and realism and removes the allure of uh, personal heroism. The mission eclipses the self. And if we talk about the film defined by restraint, restraint governs every aspect of the film. Performances, dialogue, action, and pacing. This restraint is not passive, it's deliberate, shaping a tone of quiet gravity. Silence carries authority, and if we talk about extended closing reflection of 12 Strong, it's not concerned with the inspiring acceleration. It seeks to convey the psychological cost of sustained pressure and the quiet resilience required to endure it by stripping away spectacles and emotional excess. The film presents war as an ongoing condition rather than a series of dramatic events, and its lasting impact lies in how it respects limitation of knowledge, of control, and of human body, making endurance itself the most honest form of courage. And if we go for its more review, and it will take little time more. Okay, let's talk about the quiet transformation of motivation. At the beginning, motivations is rooted in purpose and clarity. As the film progresses, that clarity erodes motivations, transformation into something quieter and heavier, resistant. Characters continue not because they feel driven, but because momentum has replaced intention. The film suggests that prolonged conflict strips motivation down to its most basic form, purpose things into endurance. And if we talk about the psychological weight of irreversibility, our choices are made. The film treats them as irreversible. There is no return to earlier positions, emotionally or strategically. This sense of point of no return creates an underlying tension that doesn't need action to sustain it. Forward motion becomes obligation. And if we talk about emotions, detachment as protection, emotional detachment emerges as a coping mechanism rather than flow. Character distance themselves, and if we talk about eternally to maintain function, the film presents this detachment without judgment. Knowledge is it as necessary for survival. Distance becomes armor. The vanishing of personal stakes. If we talk about vanishing of personal stakes, personal than personal, leave the stories and individual desire wade into irrelevance. The film allows these aspects to disappear naturally, reinforcing the idea that prolonged missions erase personal context. The self decays, and if we talk about the collapse of clear endpoint, the film avoids defining clear endpoints, goal shift and expand, preventing the comfort of a finish line without a defined end. Effort become continuous rather than goal oriented. Competition is undefined. And if we talk about the accumulation of unspoken fear, fear accumulates quietly, it's not released unarticulated. The film trusts silence to convey the accumulation, letting the audience sense weight rather than fear. It explains fear gathering the most the moral narrowing under pressure, under sustained pressure, moral consideration narrows. Decision becomes pragmatic, focused on immediate outcome rather than broader implication. The film presents this narrowing as invite, inevitable rather than unethical. Survival simplifies ethics, and the subtle degradation of optimism. Optimism degrades gradually. It does not collapse suddenly but fades through repetition and exhaustion. The film captures this erosion with restraint, hope dim slowly. And if we talk about the inescapability of environment, the environment becomes psychological inclusion. There is no sense and refuse or naturally even every location carries risk reinforcing the feeling of constant exposure. Space offers not safety. The weight of continuation itself becomes heavy. Uh, the act of moving forward carries emotion. The film recognizes that presence and persistence can be as draining as confrontation. Movements demand energy, the absence of narrative comfort. The film refuses to comfort the viewer with resilience. There are no momentum designed to align tension and artificially discomfort remains unresolved and is sustained. If we talk about emotional authenticity through withholding, by withholding emotional exploration, the film achieves authenticity. It allows the audience to enter eternal states rather than being told what to feel. Meaning emerges through absence, and if we talk about final extended reflection, 12 strong functions as a meditation on sustained pressure rather than a conventional war destroy. It portrays endurance as a gradual surrender, a necessity, not a triumph of will. By focusing on irreversibility, emotional detachment, and erosion of motivation, the film offers a sober, unembellished portrayal of modern conflict. Its power lies not in what it shows, but in what it deliberately withholds resolution, relief, and emotional release, leaving behind a lingering sense of weight rather than exhilaration. And let's go for more review. If we talk about endurance without the narrative justification, as the film advances, endurance no longer needs justification. There is no renewed speech to restate purpose. Resistance exists on in its own. Detached from explanation, this absence of justification emphasizes how conflict can strip action of meaning, leaving only continuation. Endurance exists without narrative reward. If we talk about psychological mood, replacing choice gradually disappear, action are dictated by accumulated decisions rather than fresh intent. The film subtly conveys how early compliments constant later freedom movement becomes the only available direction. Movement overrides agency. And if we talk about the erosion of emotional range, emotional range narrows extreme fade, leaving a compressed emotional state dominated by focus and fatigue. Joy and disappear alike become muted. This narrowing reflects Prolonged stress rather than emotional emptiness. Emotional becomes functional as and the silence of eternal conflict. Eternal conflict is present but unvoiced. Characters rarely articulate doubts or fear. The film retracts small behavioral shifts to communicate eternal struggle. Silence becomes the medium of conflict whisper. If we talk about survival as habit, survival transitions from effort to habit. What once required consequence resolve becomes automatic. This habit survival underscore the film central theme as resistance doesn't require inspiration, only continuation. Habit replaces resolve, and if we talk about the disappearance of fear narrative role, fear stops driving the story. It remains present but no longer proper action. Instead, fear becomes background noise, constant, dull, and unavoidable. Fear fades into atmosphere. If we talk about responsibility without relief, responsibilities accumulate but never resolve. There is no cathartic release from duty. The film emphasizes that responsibility in war does not end with the survival burden persists beyond action. And if we talk about emotional distance as a cost, emotional distance accepts a cost that the film never quantifies. Relationships flattens, reaction dull, and connection becomes residual. This cost is amplified rather than so distance is leave residue. And if we talk about the world reduced to functionality, the world narrows into functions, elements, terrain, timing, threat, beauty, meaning, and curiosity vanish. The film captured with reduction without comment, reality simplifies under pressure. And if we talk about the absence of aftermath, the film does not dwell on aftermath events and but their psychological echoes remain unaddressed. These omissions reinforce realism, acknowledging that resolution is rarely immediate. Closure is denied. And if we talk about the viewer's experience measuring the characters by maintaining restraints and repetition, the film places the viewer in a parallel state of endurance, watching become an act of resistance, mirroring the character's experience from echoes content. The final emotional state wait without release. The film concludes not with relief but with weight. The audience is left carrying unresolved tension, mirroring the ongoing psychology burden depicted throughout. Completion feels incomplete, and if we talk about ultimate reflection, 12 Strong is less a story about heroes and more a study of sustained human function under extreme pressure. It strips conflict down to resistance, obligation, and psychological narrowing. by refusing emotional excess or narrative comfort. The film achieves a rare honesty. Its greatest strength lies in restraint, acknowledgement that the most truthful portrayals of endurance is not dramatic but quietly exhausting. Let's go for its more review. If he goes, we talk about the quiet replacement with the obligation, hope gradual disappear without ceremony. It is not settled or contradicted, it is simply replaced. Obligation becomes the sustained force. The main continue not because they believe in outcome, but because stopping would invalidate everything already enduring. The film treats his transition as natural, even inevitable. Hope fades without announcement. The psychologist cost of forward on a moment. The film simply communicates that moving forward eliminates the possibility of reflection. There is no emotional effect to reconsider choices. Reflection would introduce doubt, and doubt would paralyze action. Forward motion becomes psychological self preservation. Looking back becomes dangerous. If we talk about competence as emotional skill, professional competence function as a precision, routine, and execution allow the characters to suppress emotion. Intuition, the film presents competence not as confidence, but as insulation against doubt. Skill protect the mind and the shaking of moral aspects contrast under pressure decisions are no longer evaluated on ethical breadth but on immediate survival values. The film doesn't frame this as corruption but as comparison morally simplified by necessity. Ethical becomes functional, the silence between decisions. The moments between decisions carry more weight than the decision themselves. There is space, also unspoken awareness of risk and consequence. The film lingers here, allowing tension to exist without action. Stillness carries consequence. Emotional energy as a limited resource. The film treats emotional energy as finite. Characters conserve it, spending only what is necessary. This conversation leads to muted reaction and emotional economy. Emotionization, the absence of narrative escalation rather than escalating emotionally, the film sustains a consistent level of pressure. There is no emotional peak continuation. This refusal to escalate mirror prolonged stress more accurate than traditional stress and pressure places If we talk about survival without identity reinforcement, survival doesn't reaffirm identity. The film avoids moments where characters rediscover who they are. Identity remains suspense, secondary to function and existence. If we talk about the world that is immediate utility, everything in the environment is evaluated for immediate usefulness. Landscape, tools, and time are stripped of symbolical value. The world becomes operational rather than an exchange. Reality becomes perceptual fatigue as psychological filter. Fatigue filters perception complex through thought narrows into essentials. The film reflects this by simplifying dialogue and interaction as it progress, exhaustion and its reality. And if we talk about emotional fretting as adaptation, emotional fretting is portrayed as adaptation, not loss, by reducing emotional amplitude. Character functional, the film respects this adaptation rather than dramatizing it. Flatness sustains survival. The quiet dehumanization of process. Process overtake individuality. Procedure of procedure dictates action while this ensures survival itself dehumanize experience. The film allows the distances to exist without commentary. If we talk about process replaces presence, if we talk about the lingering weight of the motion stops, even when movement, even when movement pause of weight remains, stillness does not really. The film suggests that pressure imprints itself eternally persisting beyond action. Stillness is not release. And let's talk about the first closing reflection. 12 strong ultimately portrays for a condition that compress humanity into function. It strips motivation down to obligation, emotions down to control, and identity down to utility. By refusing spectacles and emotional release, the film presents endurance as a quiet, grinding necessity. Rather than an inspiring idea, its honesty lies in inertia and more about continuous. And if we talk about this more review, We talk about the gradual disappearance of urgency. Urgency fades not because danger is lessened, but because constant threat becomes normalized and resources sharpen. Every moment later, the same danger is absorbed into routine. The film captures how sustained exposure dulls urgency without reducing risk. Threat becomes background pressures, me mind narrowing, the mind narrowing to the immediate present. Long term thinking disappears, the future sinks to the next hour, the next moment, the next decision. The film reflects this mental narrowing by avoiding forward looking dialogue or distance goals. The present consumes awareness, and we talk about emotional neutrality and stability. Emotional neutrality becomes the most stable state. Extremes of fear, anger create instability. The film suggests that neutrality is not emptiness but balance. Understand. We talk about flat emotion equals control. The absence of psychological language character do not describe what they feel. There is no vocabulary for inner states. This absence is not accidental. It reinforces how emotional amplification becomes unnecessary and even disruptive feeling exist without naming physical movement as mental anchoring, routine physical action, walking, mounting, preparing, anchor the mind. The film shows how repetition stabilizes psychology with meaning, erodes movement, replaces reflection. And if we talk about the unspoken fear of stillness, stillness is dangerous in movement stops, awareness increases, and with it doubt, the film subtly suggests that motion is used to avoid confrontation with eternal states, and if we talk about and motion protects the mind. And you have to wait a little. If we talk about the unspoken fear of stillness, stillness is dangerous when movement disrupts awareness, increase, and with it doubt. The film subtly suggests that motion is used to avoid confrontation with eternal stress. Motion protects the mind, and if we talk about decision fatigue without collapse, decision fatigue accumulates but does not break the characters. Instead, it simplifies thinking choices become binary extreme where nuance, complexity is added. We talk about authority and emotional isolation. Leadership creates emotional separation. Leaders can't share uncertainty without weakening structure. The film shows how authority isolates even within a group. Command creates distance. If we talk about a gradual erasure of time, time loses structure, there's a timeline. The film avoids marking time clarity, reinforcing discernment and mental chronology dissolve. If we talk about tactical success without psychological relief, even successful outcomes do not relieve the pressure. The mind immediately prepares for next step. The film denies relief deliberately. Success does not soothe. If we talk about human presence reduced to function, interaction becomes transactional, communication serve functions, not connection. The film shows how human presence becomes instinctual under sustained pressure. People become roles, and if we talk about the quiet loss of emotional memory, events do not linger. Emotional trauma is not processed. It is bypassed. The film reflects this by moving forward without reflection. Experience leaves no echo. And if we talk about the film's refusal to comfort the viewer, the film does not guide the viewer towards emotional interpretation. It presents conditions and allows discomfort to remain unresolved and is intentional. If we talk about aggression as the dominant emotional state, not fear, not courage, aggression becomes the defining emotional condition. The film treats aggressions as an environment rather than a reaction. If you talk about fatigue around everything, if we talk about final event reflection, 12 strong 2018 portrays war as 12 round narrowing of human experience, emotions, latents, timeless. Identity exists to function and endurance become automatic. The film's power lies in its refusal to dramatize this process. It simply allows it to exist. If we talk about dynamic release, explanation, and trend, the film achieves a quiet release, one that leaves weight rather than inspiration. Let's talk about more. If we talk about survival become automatic behavior, by the later stage of the film, survival no longer feels intentional, it becomes automatic, almost reflexive. Action happens because they must, not because they are seasoned. The film simply shows how instinctive our takes the thought when pressures last too long. Choices dissolves into habit, emotional silence as a shared agreement. No one asks how anyone feels. This is not neglect. It is shared unspoken agreement. Emotional inquiry would interrupt function. The film treats the silence as collective discipline rather than emotional failure. Silence becomes cooperation. The mind prioritizing efficiency over meaning. Uh, the mind prioritizing efficiency over meaning. Meaning becomes unnecessary. Efficiency governs everything. Movements, speech, decision, all are stripped of excess. The film presents this not as fullness but as adaptation. Meaning is extendable. And if we talk about the gradual lack of personal time, there is no personal time, no internal pause where a character belongs to themselves. Uh, the film erases private mental, reinforcing how total immersion into conflict consumes individually. The self has no refuses. And if we talk about more, the subtle fear of emotional breakdown, though no breakdown, okay, the film carries the constant implication that one could this unspoken risk reinforce restraint. Emotional control is maintained not by strength but by fear of collapse. Control is defensive. And if we talk about routine as psychological survival structures, routine becomes the primary psychological struggle. Familiar action and stabilization in unfamiliar world. The film repeatedly returns to preparation and movement and to emphasizing the grounding effects. And if we talk about routine replaces certainty, the shrinking of language, dialogue becomes minimal and function. Dialogue becomes minimal and function. Language narrows alongside emotion. The film reflects how words loss is fullness under prolonged stress. Speech become utility. If we talk about emotional flatness without emptiness, flatness doesn't equal emptiness. Beneath restraint exists awareness, fear, responsibility. The film trust the viewer to sense this depth without our expression. Emotion exists under compression. The environment and mental pressure. The environment doesn't merely threaten physically. It presses inward mentality versus vastness, reinforcing isolation, harsh terrain mirrors, eternal strength, spades on the mind. If we talk about survival without gratitude, survival is not greeted with graduation or relief. It simply allows continuation. The film avoids emotional knowledge and glossing realism. Her talent mirrors it in her strength. Space waits on. And if we talk about survival without gratitude, yes, living is not celebrated. If we talk about responsibility outlasting action, even after moments of rest and responsibility remains, it does not lift with inactivity. The film shows how obligation embodies itself eternally. Duty does not sleep. Emotional continuing without resolution. Emotional states carry forward unchanged. There is no reset after danger. The film denies emotional arcs in favor of emotional continuity. Nothing resets. The viewer's slow internalization, the film's pacing and restraint cause the viewer to internalize pressure, gradual engagement becomes endurance watching mirrors participant. The audience adapts to the film's most ideal size withholding meaning. The film never explains what endurance should mean. It doesn't frame persistence as noble or tragic. It simply shows its meaning is left unresolved. And if we talk about deepest reflections so far, 12 Strong is not concerned with triumph, inspiration, or emotional release. It's a study of prolonged function under pressure. It shows how humans narrow themselves to survive emotionally, mentally, and socially. Its honesty lies in this narrowing. The film does not ask the audience to admire endurance, it asks them to sit inside it. And let's go for its more review. Rhetorical or slow, minimal, heavy, still pure review, only fully inside feels emotion. And if we talk about existence, it is to execution. Eventual existence in the film reduced to execution. Takes are not steps toward meaning, they are existence itself. The film allows the reduction to happen gradual without signaling it has loss or transition. Doing becomes doing. The vanishing boundaries between action and action. Action is not longer something character perform. It is who their identity matches with function. The film presents the vision, partly showing how prolonged pressure erases separation between self and role. Role replaces itself. And if we talk about emotional awareness without expression, character remains emotionally aware but expressionally severe feeling continuing internally, but articulation becomes unnecessary and even feeling is silent. The inability to stop without falling apart, stopping carries danger, stillness threatens to expose, suppress strength, the film subtly implies that movement is used to avoid collapse, motion prevents fracture. We talk about responsibility as eternal weight. Responsibility no longer comes from command or mission, it resides eternally, even in silence, obligation, pressed forward the will. So, how duty embeds itself in consciousness, and duty becomes eternal gravity. The eraser of emotional hierarchy. No emotion stands above another. Fear, aggression, usual all flatten into the same unsustained state. The film avoiding highlighting emotional moment, reinforcing this labeling emotion equalize. And if we talk about the world experience only through necessity, experience is filtered entirely through necessity. There is no curiosity, no reflection. The film portrays how necessity erases perception beyond utility. Needs defines precision. We talk about human connection without intimacy. Connection persists, but intimacy does not true trust exists functional, not emotionally. The film presents still connection as sufficient for survival. If we talk about closeness about if we talk about fatigue as permanent condition, fatigue is no longer temporary, it becomes the baseline state. The film communicates this through pace and physical rather than dialogue. Existence stabilizes, and if we talk about the essence of emotional ending do not carry emotional punctuation. Movement stop at feeling continues unchanged. The film denies closure deliberately. I think concludes. If we talk about survival without interpretation, the film never interrupts the survival revive. It doesn't assign values or lessons. Survival simply occurs. Resistance exists without meaning. The viewer's slow emotional alignment as the film continues, the viewer aligns emotionally with the narrowed stage. Excitement fades, awareness remains, watching becomes participant in distance. Engagement becomes endurance. If we talk about the final reflection, 12 strong this deepest truth while feeling expression it portrays endurance as a quiet reduction of life is not into function, responsibility, and motion. The film does not elevate this condition, it simply presents it honestly. And let's talk about more. And if we talk about life reduced to immediate continuation, at this step the film presents file as a series of immediate continuation. There is no anticipation of rejection, no emotional origin. The next step exists only because the previous one did not even did not and everything. This creates a rhythm where existence is measured in moments survived rather than goals achieved. Without living increment, the absence of never in the never narrative. If we talk about characteristics of narrating their own experience eternally, there is no visual sense of what this means, and allows this absence to remain untouched, suggesting that meaning itself becomes a luxury and a sustained here, and a sustained pressure through narrows and function. If we talk about emotional presence without ownership, emotional pressure and presence without ownership, emotion exists, but it is no longer one. Fear, exhaustion, awareness pass through without being claimed. The film shows how ownership of emotion would require space. The character no longer have feelings past unclaimed. And if we talk about motion and psychological self, movement, upper center, awareness, walking, insecting, riding, preparing. These actions protect the mind from comforting accumulates strain. The film uses repetition to show how motion replaces reflection, movement, shield, consciousness, and the quiet fear of stopping forever. Stopping is not rest, it is risk. The film simply implies that stopping might mean the inability to start again. Continuation becomes self preservation at the psychological level. Stalking feels final, and if we talk about responsibilities existing without command, even without direct orders, responsibilities persisted no longer needs instruction. The film portrays responsibility as something eternalized beyond authority. Duty survives structure, and if we talk about emotional uniformity and stability, the film settles into a single emotional temperature, not cold, not intense, simply sustain. This uniformity becomes stability in a world where variation could be destabilizing. Even as plans fervent collapse, human presence reduced to redundancy. Trust is measured by predictability, not closeness. The film shows how reliability becomes the only consistency replaces intimacy. And if we talk about awareness without curiosity, characters are aware of their environment, but curiosity disappears. There is no desire to know more than what is required. The film presents the narrowing as survival, logic, and curiosity becomes unnecessary. I have to make a little bit because it's loading. If we talk about survival without witness, survival happens without knowledge when no one bears witness to it. Emotionally, the film emphasizes how endurance can occur unseen even by those enduring it. Persistence remains invisible. The film's most travel truth and the film ultimately shows the endurance is not dramatic, it's repetitive, quite narrowing, and emotionally flattering. This truth is never spoken, it is simply allowed to exist. Endurance is ordinary. If we talk about deepest ongoing reflection, tell strong doesn't tell a story in the traditional sense. It sustains a condition, it holds the viewer inside prolonged pressure long enough for meaning to thin and sensation to dominance. What remains is not information but recognition of how survival actually feels like when it lasts too long. And if we talk about more, and if we talk about continuation without anticipation, the film reaches a point where anticipation disappears. Executive no longer wait for time for outcomes. Victories are rendering actions points proceeds without expectations and these actions of anticipation removes both the hope and dread, leaving to feeling all the present, the future stops feeling. If we talk about consequence reduced to awareness, thought simplifies into awareness. There is no analysis, no projection, no emotional framing. The film shows how consequences narrow into pure attentiveness, seeing, hearing, reacting, awareness, be replaced thoughtful. If we talk about emotional stillness as functional balance, emotional stillness become the most functional state movement inside emotional motion would create instability. Stillness sustains action, the disappearance of inner commentary. There is no visible eternal commentary. Characters are not reflecting, questioning, or interpreting. The film removes this layer entirely, allowing experience to occur without narrative mediation. Experience exists strong. If we talk about the body leading the mind, the body begins to lead physical action, determines mental state, fatigue, posture, breathing, dictate perception. The film emphasizes the inversion subtly. The body decides first, and if we talk about The quiet fear of emotional re-entering emotion becomes dangerous. The feel amplified that allowing feeling back in could overwhelm function emotional sustain it's maintained not by strength but by the caution and that reduces to predictability. Trust no longer required belief which based on repetition and consistency. The film relational shift as mechanical rather than emotional. uh, physical. If we talk about the world experience as practice, the environment is no longer seen as it but as pressure, threats, exposure movements, concerns. The film shows how perception shift from scenery to past space becomes resistance. And if we talk about identify suspended identity, identity does not disappear, it is suspended. The film leaves an identity unresolved, neither affirmed or destroyed. Function hold it in place. The self waits silently. Time. If we talk about time losing direction, time no longer moves forward or backward, it stretches sideways. The film reflects this by avoiding temporal emphasis all the together. Time is still progressing. So this was the review of this movie, and I hope you liked it. And if you like it, then like it. And we all meet tomorrow and with a different movie, new movie. I hope you like it. Thank you for becoming coming with me, and thank you. So goodbye.